Comic Book Savant, episode 320.
I know this. This I know. All that I have, all that is me, resides inside my poetry. And every time I write a rhyme, it might be the line that sets mine free. And also, I know that I don't...
Welcome to the Comic Book Savant podcast. Happy 2017. This is your host, James Harris. This week, this episode, I'm going to talk about some of the most underrated comic book movies around. I've talked about the best. I've talked about the worst. I've done countdown lists of the best and worst. I feel numerous times over, but I haven't talked about underrated nearly as much, and I've never dedicated a whole episode to it. So I thought, we're going into a new year where, the amount of comic book movies that are being released, yearly now has boomed and it's going to continue to grow. I think alone this year, if we look at the year in whole, not just the summer movie season, we have somewhere between like 6 or 8 comic book movies or comic book related or tied in movies that we can tie back into comics, and even movie franchises such as like John Wick, or television properties like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers that is getting a movie. If you throw those into the mix, that list even gets longer. So I'm gonna go back and take a look at some of the ones that I think that are underrated or have over time have gotten kind of pushed to the side, and you don't hear about being talked about nearly as much. So before I get into that, as always, I'd like to give a shout out to our sponsor, which is InStockTrades.com. It's the best place to go to find collected editions or any type of special bound editions to any of your comics, from your trade paperbacks to your absolute editions to your omnibus to your Marvel Masterworks. They have some of the best prices around. They have discounts ranging from 35 to 42, and with their deals of the week, up to 50% off. If you're a U.S. customer and you order $50 or more, you get free shipping within the U.S. If you're an international customer, you still get the great savings, but they do have some of the most reasonable international shipping rates around. So definitely you want to check them out. Again, that's InStockTrades.com, and I can be able to do the show without them. So I appreciate all their support. They've been a longtime partner of the podcast. Going into this year, I want to do, more stuff and expand. I apologize, and I wanted to talk about this last episode when it comes to the direction of the podcast. Just due to personal reasons, and and just dealing with my health primarily. My health has been, a big issue for me over the past few years, and at times it's prevented me from putting as much as I've wanted to into the podcast. But, I'm working hard. I'm rededicating myself this year to really get my health in check, and I really... I made small improvements to the show last year. You guys stood by me, even with the, when I went through some things and I was moving around. I had to, I took a break from the show for a few months, like during the summertime. You guys have came back. You've continued to support. You've went back and listened to previous episodes. You guys have reached out to me and things of that nature. And I just really appreciate everything you guys offer and support. It all helps. It all helps keep me motivated, and I want to do better. I talked about last year wanting to do social media more. I'm pushing myself again. It's not necessarily my comfort zone, but I want to give you guys ways to really be able to contact me and be a part of the show. So I've dedicated myself to at least tweet once or twice a day. So now if you actually follow follow me on Comic Book Savant, you actually see me actually tweeting. I got to get better on Instagram. I'm starting with Twitter. I'm posting at least, like 2 or 3 times a day. And, maybe we could discuss topics that are upcoming or things that you guys want me to cover. So if you've been a listener of the podcast and you haven't followed me, if you have a moment, definitely follow me on Twitter. It's at Comic Book Savant. It is the same thing at Instagram. I'm going to post more pictures and maybe do like live behind the scenes videos. Just, give you guys an idea of, kind of what goes on behind the scenes and what I go through, just piecing together an episode week to week and that whole process, give you guys the kind of inside look. I want you guys to be an integral part of the show. You guys support me. You guys are the ones that are listening. So I want to do more stuff. I have some things in the works with in-stock trades where I'll be doing some giveaways. So I'm going to interact with Twitter and Instagram for those kind of things, to bring more things to give back to you guys for helping, support me and keep the show going for, as long as it has. And, and I don't have any intentions of stopping anytime soon. Like I said, I've been having a ball doing the show, over the past, 5 years. Like I said, I've had parts where I've had to step away for a while, mainly because of health and then, family reasons. I had a lot of major deaths in my family, over the past like 5 years or so. So, and all that, guys, you've, stuck through. So I want to, this year definitely want to get the show elevated. We got the creation of the YouTube channel, doing content for that. And I'm still, finding my way through that. It's a links to all the social media stuff. If you go to the website at Comic Book Savant, it's links to all the social media stuff. It's out there. So if you go to comicbooksavant.com, it's, links to the YouTube channel, the Facebook page, all the places you can subscribe, like iTunes, Google Play, all the type of links are all there for the social media stuff. So if you don't remember it and me listening and listening to the episode, you can always go to the website and find all that core information to branch out to that stuff. With all that said and out of the way, I want to give a shout out to one of my really close friends in podcasting, my friend Mike Myers and my other friend Daryl Taylor. They do a really great podcast called DC Noise. You can find it at dcnoisepodcast.com. I'll have links in the show notes on the website, so you can find their website, or just do a search for DC Noise on iTunes. You should be able to find it. Mike Myers is a big supporter of the show. I met him actually through the forums I had many years ago, and Daryl as well, through Comic Geek Speak. When I first started out podcasting, Comic Geek Speak is probably still one of the biggest, comic book podcasts out there. And I actually met both the guys on the forums there. I had a sub forum for the show back then, through Comic Geek Speaks comic forum. And Mike Myers was a listener, and then he branched out and started doing podcasts, which he does multiple shows, as well as Daryl. They do a huge amount of shows. Where I have my one show, gosh, I've lost count. Mike does like 4, 5, 6. Daryl does that, if not more. So they're really good friends. I wanted to give them a shout out. If you want to know anything about DC Comics, definitely check out DC Noise. They just put out an episode, was released yesterday, where they go over all their current DC Comics reads. They're very thorough, and they're very, very knowledgeable. They're probably 2 of the most knowledgeable people I know when it comes to just comics in general, and especially like just the DC lore in general. So if you have a moment, stop by the dcnoisepodcast.com and check that show out, and let them know that you heard about them here on Comic Book Savant. I really would appreciate that. Want to spread some of the love to some of my friends in podcasting. So if you have a moment, check that out. Now to underrated comic book movies. And this is, again, my list is in no particular order. I just thought about 10 movies to me that you don't hear about, or don't get the acknowledgement of some other movies. We have a bad habit, in society nowadays, is when something's new and shiny, it's like the darling, and you talk about nothing else, to the next new thing comes out, and the next new thing, but you don't look back at the history and look back at what got you to that point, and then maybe the significance of some of those things. Because we're always with social media, like soon as one thing drops, we're looking to the next and to the next, and again we don't take time to maybe reevaluate and focus on our history as much as we should. So the first movie that's on my list for me is Dredd. It came out in 2012. This was the Carl Urban, really nicely done, very heavily influenced by The Raid, if you've ever seen. I want to say it's a Cantonese film, super duper action movie, borrowed heavily from that movie, but done with Dredd, done on a super low budget. It's Carl Urban and Leah Headley from Game of Thrones are in the movie. It was Dredd done right. We had, years before with the Sylvester Stallone Dredd, which was like horrible. This was really done right, done on a smaller budget, got back to the core of the character. I felt like it just really worked as a movie. I remember I was so hyped for the movie. I saw a few trailers. I remember that year at Comic-Con, it was a big deal. And, I really thought, okay, like this movie's really going to take off. They did a private screening for fans at Comic-Con that year. Everyone was raving over the movie. Then we come back and then it's like a dud. It like totally bombed at the box office, and never could really understand why it bombed. When seeing the movie, it was a really good movie. I never even got a chance at the time. I wanted to, but I couldn't even find a theater. Like it wasn't even being carried, anywhere by me at the time. So I couldn't even go see it if I wanted to, which was downright depressing. And, so I couldn't see it till it came out, on iTunes, and I just immediately bought the movie and love it. I know at one point it was on Netflix. So if you never haven't seen the movie, it's a rated R comic book action movie done extremely well. I always hoped that they would do a sequel. I know Carl Urban, within the past 6 months or so, said he would love to do something else with Dredd if they would. He's like, he doubted it ever would happen, but for some reason, if it did, he would be totally down, even if it was like a Netflix series or like HBO Showtime. He was like, whatever they would do, he would be totally down to do it. So I would love to see it, the continuation of his Dredd. Would love it. Just, it's been 2012. We're in 2017. 5 years later, and nothing. But it was very, very underrated. And it just didn't get the support from Hollywood. But it was a very good comic book movie, and very true to the darker, grittier roots of the character. Totally outshines the 90s. Or maybe early 2000s. I can't even remember. Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd movie. Next for me would be Blade. I have really strong feelings towards Blade. This was released in 1998. Everyone talks about this age of comic book movies that we're in now, and a lot of people cite the Singer X-Men movie or the Spider-Man Raimi movies as like what sparked this golden age. But it was actually Blade that came out a little bit before that really sparked this current modern age, in my opinion. Blade was a hit. It wasn't a big a hit as later with Singer, with X-Men was, or the Spider-Man Raimi movies, but it was kind of the pilot, so to speak. Like you have a pilot testing a TV show. It was the pilot for the modern era of comic book movies as we have it. They took a lesser known property, which Marvel has made a living off of now because they didn't own the rights to some of their major characters when they started, Marvel, the Marvel studios. They took a lesser known character, made a movie. They, modernized it. Also, rated R action, comic book action movie. People ran about Deadpool and how it was the first rated R comic book movie. It's not. Dread was one. It wasn't successful, but it was good. It couldn't help people that go see it. And then Blade, which was a hit in its time, but cinema, in '98, cinema as we know now was totally a different thing. We didn't have multi-million-dollar marketing budgets for movies, and we didn't have the internet on the level that we have it now. We don't have social media. All these things play such a huge part, I feel, in advertising for movies and getting movies on the into pop culture and in people's awareness level. They didn't have all those things to help. Even Wesley Snipes, he was a relatively good sized star at that point. As far as the director, as far as the studio, was New Line. Later when you have X-Men, Bryan Singer was coming off of The Usual Suspects, which was a mega hit. So he was a huge name. So that in itself attracted people. Blade, like I said, was really a pilot run for it. They took like I said, I don't know, maybe a C or D list character, brought him into the modern age. Played up his strengths, minimized his weaknesses, and made it hip for the time. And it really worked, and I felt like it was the blueprint. It's the fundamental blueprint on what we see Marvel Studios do with all their properties now. Who would have thought, what I have thought in 1998 when Blade came out, that I ever would have seen a Doctor Strange movie or an Ant-Man movie? No. But it just shows you how far we came, and it all started. That was the blueprint. That's the fundamental blueprint that Marvel Studios is founded on. I wish, some other studios, Warner Brothers, would learn from that. The next movie for me on my list is Captain America: The First Avenger. I think this movie, because it's hurt in a way because it's a period piece, and I have to say personally, I'm a huge movie fan outside of being a comics fan. Probably my next love as a hobby next to comic books are movies. And I've done a previous podcast that I no longer do called Pop Media Savant, where I reviewed movies. So between, and this is coming from someone that, it's not a living because I really don't make too much money doing this on either side, no matter how many shows I did. I've literally reviewed hundreds to thousands of movies on podcasts between the two shows. Over the years, so I take it seriously when I do it. I feel like that this movie, and I don't like period films and pieces at all, but it just, for some reason, it works in this movie for me. The director, Joe Johnson, he did a movie when I was a kid, The Rocketeer, another comic book movie. It's kind of an underrated type movie that they're doing. I've heard rumors that they're doing a sequel of, and he captures when he does that period piece type movie, and he does it. They picked the perfect director for it because it works extremely well. I felt like it was a great place to go. For the character, seeing that he was a man out of place, out of time. And I felt like without this movie, we couldn't have the awesome movies later that the Russo brothers did, because you saw his humble beginnings and, ending. I thought it was so cool how it ended on such a strong note, seeing, him coming to the realization that, he lost all those years. He was frozen, he gets thawed out, and he's in the present day, and how he's totally this man out of he's a man without a country. He's a man displaced in time. And I thought it was so cool, and it made me sympathetic to his character and the plight that he found himself in going into the other movies, and it made him relatable. It made Chris Evans and his performance in the movie is so good. Seeing him and the technology thing they did, where he was the short, skinny Steve Rogers, like he sold that and so well, in his chemistry with I'm forgetting her name, Agent Carter, Peggy Atwell. It was so great in that whole relationship. It's just a really good movie. I went back recently and I watched the whole, trilogy, and I think, without this movie you couldn't have the rest. And I feel like it's not my favorite movie out of the trilogy, but I think it is Marvel's best trilogy of all their characters. It is the best one. They just got better and better, but it started with a great foundation. And you never really hear when people talk about their, top 5 list or top 10 list even of Marvel movies. You don't hear Captain America, the First Avenger in those lists that much. And I think it's a really strong and a really good movie. So next movie for me is going to be Man of Steel. This movie is like most of the current DC movies are divisive. This is the one that really, is the starter. It is the Iron Man, so to speak, for our current DC expanded universe that we have going on right now. Man of Steel is not a bad movie. I like Henry Cavill as Superman. I like the way they showed that, he had to show restraint when he wanted to help, that when his powers start developing, that it was a painful thing for him, because sensory overload. I love they did that stuff in school, and because of it he was kind of an outcast, and he was deemed a weirdo, and he was picked on, and he really struggled with trying to understand that he's an alien. Then he was being raised and then developing these powers, and at times where he wanted to lash out, and how much restraint he showed. I like they really made him human, because I feel like that's where, with the character of Superman, so many writers and screenwriters, and this is in the comics as well, go wrong. They make him more of a god or some type of deity than a human. He was raised by humans. He has human emotions. So I like that he had the one scene where he's being picked on, and he's they're outside of a garage or whatever, and his dad comes, and he's trying so hard. He just wants to punch the kid, but he knows if he punches the kid, he's probably going to kill him. And he is grasping the post to the metal fence. And when the kids walk off and his dad gets him, you can see that he was actually angry, and he had totally destroyed the post, like where he had crumbled it up in his hand to try to keep his wits about him, so he didn't snap, because it could have major consequences. And the whole scene where he could have saved his father, but Kevin Costner is so great in that role as Papa Kent or Jonathan Kent, and wanting to protect. He loved Clark so much that he died so he could keep his secret, because he didn't want his son potentially to be taken away from him, and he loved him that much that he sacrificed his own life. That's a bond beyond bonds, and and it always hits me in a certain place, because I lost my father, a few years ago, around it was 2012, so it was actually right before this movie came out. And in seeing the sacrifices and understanding that from a personal perspective, and losing my father and the things in his life that he sacrificed for me, and my sister to have a better life, to be in that moment, to risk his life because he feared for his son's safety. It's something as a parent that you that you do. It was just so touching, and it just rounded off Henry Cavill's Superman with a certain humility and a certain relatability that I felt like other versions of Batman, not Batman, Superman didn't have on screen. They were like too perfect, too good, which too much of a Boy Scout. They gave him some flaws and gave him room to grow, to become, and I think we're still going through that process from Man of Steel to Batman v Superman to Justice League and maybe even Justice League Part 2 into Man of Steel 2. That it's going to be this journey that the finished product in the journey will be the Superman that we know and love. But it's going to be an arc, and I think Henry Cavill is a very good actor that he can pull that off. So anyway, I feel like Man of Steel is definitely totally one of the biggest, most recent underrated movies, because it's really a good movie. I went back and watched it not too long ago, and I really enjoyed it, and it adds so much to Batman v Superman, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Next movie for me is 2005's Batman Begins. Everyone talks about The Dark Knight. It is a phenomenal movie. It is. The performance from Heath Ledger is, again, Oscar worthy. It won an Oscar. But I think people tend to forget about Batman Begins. It totally turned the origins of Batman kind of on its ear. We never really had it fleshed out. And when I go back and look at this movie, it holds up. I went back and watched a whole bunch of, in the past year, I went back just watching my favorite movies and see how they still stand up compared to all the newer stuff, more technology, more effects, bigger budgets, better, even better casting. There's so much now because it's become a big business. So you go back to look at a movie that came out in 2005, it still holds up extremely well. And I feel like they opened up that door because it was so vague about the roots during the time Bruce, left before this movie came out. And then I feel like so much of Snyder's run through Detective and even Batman, where they did backstories where during that time they showed him train and do different things. It was all attributed to Batman Begins because it opened that door to start fleshing that gray area in Batman's history out and made it fair game, and they took it in the comics and ran with it, and it influenced so much great storytelling because it was so much time there that you could mine and build up so many good stories and new characters. So I think Batman Begins actually helped the Batman comic and mythos out because it opened up a new time period and it allowed writers to really have some fun and add to that mythos where they weren't rewriting the same period of the career, very beginning of him being Batman, but seeing the roots of Bruce Wayne creating Batman and really fleshing that out. I feel like that movie has a lot to do with that. The next movie for me is The Incredible Hulk, the 2008 Ed Norton one. I really like this movie. It has kind of fallen back for me when I ranked my Marvel movies. It kind of has fallen back some just because they didn't support it. The whole thing with Edward Norton went sideways. They brought in Mark Ruffalo, which has done a terrific job. They haven't attempted to do another standalone Hulk movie since then. Hulk's been in the Avengers movies, and then you started with a whole new character and a whole other take on the character, which is kind of sad that they don't touch back on it. This is kind of like out of all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, this is really like the one that has the least connective tissues, except for Thunderbolt Ross. From that movie was the Thunderbolt Ross in Captain America Civil War. They did bring him back, but that was like really the only element. They set up some really nice things in it with the leader that we might never see. I would like to see Betty Ross come back and with Liv Tyler. That we'll see that. But I would like to kind of see some of those things because I felt like she was one of the strongest heroines or female companions in any of the Marvel movies. So I would love to see her character kind of come back. Like I said, I doubt we will ever see it, and that makes me kind of sad because it's a really solid movie. It was way better than the Ang Lee Hulk movie, of course, but I like the fact that they still tied into that movie existed in a way, and how they tied those two movies together in the beginning credits, and then just expanded from there and took the ball and ran with it. I mean, they picked up small elements of the story, but it's just a different actor. But I'd like to see more of that history touched upon somewhere down the road. I don't know. I seriously doubt it'll ever happen. But my fingers are still crossed because it's one of my favorite. But again, it just doesn't hold up because it connects the very least out of all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies. Next for me is Kick-Ass, another rated R comic book movie. Again, Deadpool wasn't the first one. That was really good. Indie darling. I remember at the time, this was 2010, summer of 2010. I was in Connecticut at the time, and my current wife, it was around my birthday or my birthday, and it was like one theater. When I talk about indie darlings, Kick-Ass was a total indie darling. We rode like an hour to a small theater to be able to see this movie because it was like the only movie theater in the state of Connecticut that had Kick-Ass showing when it was released into 2010. It was like crazy, but I got a chance to see it at the theaters. Loved it. I still love the movie. Really different, and I never read the comic, and still to this day I said at some point I want to go back and read the Kick-Ass series. I just saw the movie, really enjoyed the characters, the take on it. Now Kick-Ass 2 wasn't nearly as good as the original, but I really think this movie holds up. It was really strong, for what it was. So I do give props to Kick-Ass that it was definitely an indie darling, and it's sad that, it's been talks that they might do a Hit Girl movie, at some point, but then they talked about the whole pirating situation of Kick-Ass 2 and how it it got a bigger budget. They went bigger, but it didn't perform as well as it needed to. And the year it came out, it was like the heaviest pirated movie of that year, which they felt like helped hurt the box office for it, to where the studio did not feel comfortable in greenlighting a third Kick-Ass movie, which is unfortunate. I would have liked to see a third movie to see where Kick-Ass and Hit Girl kind of where they went to next. Maybe, like I said, it's been talks now that they might do a Hit Girl movie, maybe not a direct Kick-Ass sequel, but spin out Hit Girl. I guess time will tell on that. Next is the Wolverine. I feel like came out 2013. I like this movie. I didn't necessarily like the ending of the movie, but I liked like 80% of the movie, if that's a thing. I liked 80% of the movie a lot. I really liked the seeing Wolverine in Japan and fighting ninjas and stuff. That's a big part of his history in the comics, and seeing it on the big screen worked. The whole way they did like the Silver Samurai there at the end and the Viper, you can't have a Wolverine movie without messing something up that you should have been able to do really simple. My fingers are crossed for Logan, and I'm super hype about Logan, which is only a couple of months away. It's beginning of March, I think, so we're only like 2 months away. But I really enjoyed this movie, and I think the stench was so loud from Wolverine, X-Men Origins Wolverine, that this movie was just doomed right from the outset because people just had such a bad taste in their mouth from the first Wolverine movie that I don't think enough people gave it a fair enough shot. Like I said, the ending is not the best, but the rest of the movie is really a really solid Wolverine movie, and I like the things they did with his backstory and even how it leads, directly into Days of Future Past with the whole ending and all that kind of stuff. I really like the Wolverine. I think, like I said, it just gets overlooked and overshadowed just because how bad X-Men Origins Wolverine is, and I think that's a shame because it's a solid movie. Next for me is Kingsman: The Secret Service. And this came out 2014. Again, do you notice a pattern on my list? Another rated R comic book movie. I feel like it's loosely based. I remember looking through maybe one issue of it. I don't know how different. I think I heard reports like, they really kind of loosely based it. It's not like a straight up adaptation like Kick-Ass was. In Kingsman, but it's really good. It was a really good movie. It got overshadowed. It came out in a weird, a summer where there's a lot of top-notch movies that came out. It performed extremely well. We got the sequel coming out this year. The Golden Circle. Really great performances, really good action. Just totally under the radar. You don't hear people talking about that. I feel like Kingsman especially gets overshadowed by Deadpool. But both are phenomenal action movies, comic book action movies. Deadpool just made a buttload of money, more than any other movie, especially rated R movie, highest grossing rated R movie of all time, or action movie of all time, whatever. But it's like the top grossing movie of all time when it comes to rated R action. But Kingsman did not disappoint. It exceeded expectations, and it's a really good movie. And I'm really hyped about the sequel coming down the road, which is, like I said, that comes out summer, June, I want to say. It comes out June, July of this summer. And then last but not least, to round out the top 10 list for me is Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice. And I'm going to preface this, Ultimate Edition. That is very important that I say that. The Ultimate Edition, the theatrical version or cut of the movie is okay. I think the Ultimate Edition is good. That 30 additional minutes of footage helps the movie a great deal, and I feel very strongly that, and I watched these movies actually back to back, and this movie, to me, makes Man of Steel stronger. I kind of have this same feeling towards, a lot of times people said Quantum of Solace is not a really good, I'm going to use this as an example, that Quantum of Solace is not a really good James Bond movie. And I beg to differ because I think people don't realize that Quantum of Solace is really not a standalone James Bond movie. Quantum of Solace is meant as a companion to Casino Royale. You really can put those together as one movie and watch that straight through. It's one continuous arc. It's one continuous story and story arc in that character's development dealing with a particular situation. It's a similar thing with Man of Steel. Man of Steel, when you look at it next to Batman, Dawn of Justice, and you look at the Ultimate Edition or the stuff they cut out of the movie that they put back in, all deals directly a lot with Lois and a lot of with Superman's world. And it sets up, this is the beginning of his career. They say that in Batman v Superman, he's only been, Superman like 18 months. So he's very early in his career as a superhero, and he ends Man of Steel becoming a reporter. You see all the reporting, all the stuff they cut out is him being a reporter in Batman v Superman. So you kind of see his journey, you understand his perspective so much more in the Ultimate Edition, and I feel like in all the stuff that's happening, his conflict with Batman, why Batman is angry with him, the whole fallout is from what happens in Man of Steel with his fight with Zod. It's a fallout. It's the consequences of him donning the suit. Everything that his father worried about for him happened, coming to fruition, and him dealing with coming out of the shadows to the forefront and all the scrutiny and the criticism and the fallout that came from it. It is a continuous arc. You can't have one, you can't look at one without the other, but in no time, and any time you read reviews from people or you watch YouTube and all that kind of stuff where people like to talk about and analyze these things, you never hear that point. If you take the time to watch Man of Steel and then watch Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, both movies make a lot more sense from a Superman perspective. And it's funny for me because I'm more of a Batman fan than a Superman fan, but Zack Snyder's take on it makes a lot of sense, and it's a very modern take, and it takes a really good actor. And people say all these different things about Henry Cavill. Oh, you know, he's no Christopher Reeve. He's not. He's a modern day take on the Superman character that makes him relatable and understandable. He's not a Boy Scout. We don't have a lot of Boy Scouts running around nowadays in society. It's a lot of grayer areas. You know, we live in a different time from in the 60s, 70s, or 80s. This is a modern day Superman, but I feel like, again, he has room to grow and evolve into the Superman we know. And when they have that moment on screen, it'll be such a payoff because we see how he started in his journey to greatness, so to speak. So I feel like it's totally a companion to one another, and you have to have them together to get the fullest effect from it. And from it, again, I feel like, it was a very divisive movie. A lot of people hated Batman v Superman, but I feel like the Ultimate Edition cut is a really good movie. I'm not going to say it's the greatest movie or my favorite of the year or anything, but it's a really good movie. It went from an okay to decent movie to a good movie for me. And when I went back and I watched Man of Steel, it even gave me a little bit something more from it. So I feel like it's totally underrated because most of the time when people talk about it, they talk about it saying it's a bad movie. But I think looking at the right cut and the right perspective, you can get a lot more out of the movie. So that is my top 10 list of top 10 underrated comic book movies. I'm going to run it back down for you. We got Dredd, Blade, Captain America the First Avenger, Man of Steel, Batman Begins, The Incredible Hulk, Kick-Ass, The Wolverine, Kingsman, The Secret Service, and Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice Ultimate Edition. That is very important that it is the Ultimate Edition. Don't watch the theatrical version because you're going to be mad at me and you're going to be mad at yourself because I told you the right thing and you went and you still watched the wrong thing. So make sure Ultimate Edition, Ultimate Edition, Ultimate Edition only. If you want to find me, you can find me at comicbooksavant.com. Again, on Twitter at comicbooksavant, on Instagram also at comicbooksavant. The Facebook page, facebook.com /comicbooksavant. You can find me there as well. All the links to social media is on the website. If you scroll down to like the bottom of the page, you'll see the little icons for the different social media things. If you go up at the top as well, they have, if you go to, support, also, yeah. So if you go to the website, up at the top, you'll see a navigation bar. If you go to the support link, it'll have all the social media stuff for Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and Google+. And if you want to subscribe, it's a subscribe link that takes you to a page that has iTunes and Google Play there as well. So you can find it on all the different social medias. Just check out the website at comicbooksavant.com. It'll have all the information you need there. That's all I have for you guys this week. I'll see you again next week with another episode of Comic Book Savant. And again, I hope you guys are having a good start to the new year. Take care.
And into lyrical wholeness. And I know this, and I know this. This I know, this I know.